This is the bedside stand that belongs to the daughter of a neighbor of mine. They've been trying to keep it functional by painting it, and they haven't had a whole lot of success keeping the top part from getting dinged and nicked up and scratched. So we're going to fix this because I just happen to have a piece of black laminate that will work great for this countertop. Now, if you're new to woodworking, laminate is one of those things that you should try, and try it early on, because if you have a router and a file, then you're pretty much set for being able to do this. It requires a couple of bits to do it right. There are a couple of router bits that are inexpensive, one that's a straight cut and then one that has a slight bevel cut on it. So this is one of those things that you get a lot of feedback from quickly because it goes together in a hurry. And I'll just show you the process that I've used for years when I do simple laminate countertop. Square corners, nothing fancy. Now I'm going to get started by sanding the top and getting rid of some of the black paint that's on it. Give us a better grip with the contact cement when we get to that point. And then we'll go to cutting up some laminate, putting pieces together. I'm taking 100 grit sandpaper and taking off some of the black paint. Since it was just painted in the past few days, I'm not concerned that there are problem areas with the paint job. The adhesive for the laminate sticks to anything, so I'm just going to rough it up a little and take off anything that comes off easily. Now the front edge of the countertop turns out not to be secured very well. So I'm pulling it off as far as I can and then use a putty knife to help get it to release the rest of the way. I'm going to take contact cement and stick this back in place since it was loose, and then we'll go over the top of that with the new laminate. When you put contact cement on two separate surfaces you're going to stick together, once they touch after the contact cement is dried a little bit, then they stick immediately and that bond is done. So you want to be careful with your planning as you're doing this. The other thing, I use a flammable base contact cement that I just like better. I've used for years. This flammable type of contact cement is not good for you. So you want to wear a mask that filters out the fumes, work in a well-ventilated area, and keep it away from any sparks, any flames. So just take precautions if you use this type of contact cement. I'm going to cut the laminate on the table saw. I don't typically do that, but in this case it's such a small piece that I'm comfortable going ahead and making the cuts on the table saw. I'm going to link another video where I do some more laminate work and show you how I cut on the floor with a straight edge and a scoring blade. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the table saw and make the cuts that I need, and it's faster. Just have to be careful. I think the main reason I prefer cutting laminate with a straight edge over the table saw is that the straight edge is just more accurate. Because the laminate is so flimsy, it can be a challenge to keep it running straight through the saw blade on the table saw. But for cutting small pieces, as I said, it works fine. Two end pieces and one front piece, and then our top piece will go on after that. I'm going to take a quick break and show you why it's cool to live in New Mexico. So just stay put. Run outside here real quick. Give you a view of what our sunsets look like this time of year. Right now we're in the final days of the International Balloon Fiesta, which is the big major event that happens in Albuquerque every year. They say it's the most photographed event in the world. This is what they're getting to see right now before they do an evening balloon blow. So this is what happens this time of year in New Mexico. We get this kind of stuff almost every day. Okay, back to the show. Since I mentioned the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta last night, Because it's such a unique event, happens one time a year, I shot some footage of it this morning. So let me give you about 60 seconds of that from this morning. Come back, put the edging on, and finish up this little countertop. Okay, back to our edging. I'm taking a file and knocking off the sharpness from the edges of the laminate that will be the bottom edge of the countertop. It's easier to do it now than after it's installed. When applying glue to the edge pieces of the edging itself, if you start in the middle of the pieces and brush out to cover the material, it helps with cleanup. Lacquer thinner will cut contact cement, but after it's dried, it's a time-consuming chore to clean it up off the finished laminate. When installing the edge pieces, simply line up the bottom of the pieces you just filed with the bottom of the edge of the countertop and then press them in place. Then use a roller or a block to put pressure on the two surfaces to bind them together. I have cut all the pieces about 1/4 inch oversized to give me plenty of material to cover the countertop edge. When it comes to the piece of the laminate for the countertop, I cut it at least 1/2 inch larger than the countertop itself. Here are the router bits that I was talking about a little bit earlier. One is a straight bit. The straight bit we use to make this cut here against to cut off this excess, and then on the countertop itself. We don't have to worry about the bottom because we've already filed that, and that's a good straight edge. But we make the cut in the router this way to make this piece flush with the countertop. Then the next cut, once we stick the new piece of laminate on the countertop, the next cut is with this beveled bit. So this bevel cut then allows us to back cut the edge of the laminate piece that's stuck to the top, and then gives it almost a finished edge when it's done. When cutting the material with the router, you want the cutting surface of the bit to extend slightly further out from the router base than the thickness of the laminate. Also make sure that the bearing on the bit spins freely. I always give it a shot of silicone lubricant just before using it. If the bearing is frozen up and it is running against the newly installed edge pieces, it will burn the laminate very easily. Learning to use a file on laminate is just a process that takes some practice. When filing the top edge before installing the top piece of laminate, I'm just making sure that nothing is sticking up that will interfere with the top bonding well with the countertop. There's no magic to applying contact cement to the laminate top and the countertop. You just want to get an even coat on both surfaces. This is when the fumes from the contact cement are in their full glory. If you're trying to do this without a mask, this is when you will know that that decision was a mistake. Once both surfaces are dry, they will still feel tacky to the touch. At this point, take dowels or thin wood strips and use them to help position the top piece of laminate in place. Once you're sure you have overhang all the way around the countertop, Then gently begin removing the strips and let the two surfaces touch. It's generally better to start in the middle when pulling strips. If you have fouled up on positioning of your laminate top, you've committed a fatal error. You will not be able to pull it up and reposition it without destroying it. So make sure everything looks good before you start pulling the strips. I don't typically do this, but in this case I forgot to turn on the camera before I started routing the top with the beveled bit. So I'm showing you a fake run around the top with the router. Sorry about that. Finally, this is where you develop your filing skills. To make the edges of the laminate look nice, you have to get the feel for how the file cuts. If you cut too deep, you cut into the face of your edge pieces, which shows, and there's no way to fix it. But all it takes is a little practice to get it right. So there it is, a new countertop for the nightstand. Simple project, big improvement for sure. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something maybe about installing laminate that you didn't know. Process is pretty simple, and I just gave you the basics of it so you can kind of take it from there. I hope you enjoyed the little diversion into the Balloon Fiesta. That's a neat event that happens in this city, and I was happy to share that with you. Remember, there's always something going on around Dobbs Workshop. So I hope you stop in every once in a while and see what you may have missed. Thanks for watching.